Hi everybody, thanks for listening in again today. This is another session of In Conversation With. I'm Lynn McKenzie and I'm joined today by Lynda Graham.
Hello.
Lynda, thanks so much for coming along today. It's great to have a chat with you and to be in the same room as you. Again, it's really nice to see people in person.
Thank you. Yes, it is nice to be back in person. Been on Zoom for a year,
yes.
So it's quite nice
to be in a room with
somebody.
Screen being this close and not away from there.
Yeah, I know, it's really good. So thanks for the invitation.
No problem at all. It's really good to have you. I'm glad you said yes. So tell us a bit about yourself and your role in the community and how you came to be doing what you're doing at the minute.
Okay, so my name's Lynda Graham and I work as a counsellor based in Carrickfergus. I live at Joymount. I'm married to Richard and have a son called Mark, who's 25 now.
Oh goodness.
And a dog called Molly, who's 13. Better not forget about her. So how I came to do my job, that's a bit of a story. Do you want the whole story?
Well, you decide. Here's the highlights.
Okay, the highlights. So I worked as a social worker for 100 years. Not quite. I qualified in 1986 and then I worked in child protection work and then moved into fostering and adoption work. And during that time, I qualified as a counsellor. So 6.5 years ago, I decided to go into private practice. So that's when I moved out of the job that I was in adoption work, into counselling in the community, I suppose you could say. So I work from home. I'm based. I've got my own therapy room there, and I work from home. And I suppose that's how I came to be where I am now. In a nutshell, a very fast road for a very slow journey, I suppose, in a way.
Yeah. And that spanned a few different careers then, like your career has changed from one thing to the next.
Yeah.
And probably quite similar in some ways.
Yeah. In some ways for me it was a gradual progression because as a social worker working with people in foster and adoption situations, there were some counselling roles there. And I suppose some of the skills are very transferable. So to move into purely counselling work was somewhere I felt that I wanted to go, but also felt I was being led into that and the doors were opening, and I have no regrets at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I really love what I do.
That's great. And you mentioned there about doors opening and feeling that you were being led. You know, how would you say that your faith has sort of taken you to where you are now? What part has faith played in your life?
Well, faith has played a huge part in my life all the way through, but it was interesting. When I was at school, all I ever wanted to be was a teacher. Because I had this amazing P1 teacher called Miss Pepper, and I just loved her. In fact, everybody loved her. But she was a huge influence in my life, and I wanted to be a teacher. And not that I could ever have been like her, because she was so patient and lovely, but I always wanted to be a teacher. And then I suppose when I was 18, probably when I finished school, I left school at 5th year and I went to college. And when I was finishing off there, I got a job one summer, purely by accident actually, in a children's home. And I worked there in the kitchen. I worked in 2 children's homes that summer. And I had applied to do teaching, and I also had applied to do business studies and accountancy, with the aim to go on and do teaching afterwards. And that summer, I landed there purely by accident into that job. And while I was in one of the children's homes, the officer in charge and several of the staff were Christians, and I had a ball there. I just had such a great time there with the kids and the staff, and would have stayed on in the evenings and gone to the park or out to cinema or stuff with them. And while I was there, a couple of the staff said, "What are you going to do accountancy and business for? You need to be doing social work." And I didn't really know what a social worker was way back in 1981 or 82 it was. So I had no idea what a social worker was. But I started to get to know them very well, and then when it came to August, they were like, you could reapply, or there was like a second opening for places. So I was to go to Jordanstown, and I contacted Jordanstown and said, "Can I change my course?" So I went and had an interview and was successful. So it all changed that summer. So I suppose it was God putting me in that place, wasn't it? And using those people. So it's really interesting just when you look back and see the journey.
Yeah.
And I suppose too, over the years, I grew up in Crossgar, County Down, and worked in Belfast. And then, as you know, Richard's a minister, so when I got married I had to move because he was moving to County Tyrone, to Castledarg.
Right.
So I had to give up my job, and I didn't want to because I loved where I worked.
Yeah.
And I was just about to go off on a secondment, which could have been really exciting, and my career would have gone another direction probably. But I had to pack all that in and leave, and had no job. So I went off to Castledarg, newly married, with no job. And again, I could see where God's hand was in that, because I had applied for a job and they said I'd have to start immediately, and I said, but I'm getting married and going honeymoon, and they said they wouldn't hold the job. And so I'd applied for a lecturing post as well as social work post, and when I came back from honeymoon there was an answering machine message to say, could you phone the college immediately? And when I phoned them, they said they hadn't appointed and they wanted to interview me immediately.
Right.
So I went in there and I worked for about 1.5 years as a lecturer. Loved it, but hated it. Putting me into a classroom was like putting me into a cage.
Right.
Because I was used to being out in the community, and I love working in the community. So again, that was another change where I was panicking about having no job, but there was a door open for me when I came home, and I started there that August. So it's just interesting when you look back. You know, it's wavy and windy, and it's got lots of bumps in the road, but I think it definitely teaches us to trust.
Yeah. And then sometimes it's not until you look back that you can see it's your faith that allows you to take that next step into the uncertainty and the unknown, knowing that it's going to be okay somehow, but just not maybe knowing how or what.
And that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, and we like to have it very neat. We like to just pick a career or a job or whatever we're picking, and just that be the thing. But to be okay with the movement and the change it can be difficult, but it's quite freeing when you get into sort of a pattern or a rhythm where you can accept that change is part of life.
Yeah, it's easier now, isn't it, when you look back? But it's not easy at the time, is it?
No, not at all.
You're pulling your hair out and you don't sleep at nights and you're thinking,
yes,
what if, but yet.
I know I like to have things figured out, you know, and know.
Yeah, me too.
Even if it's just the one next step, but I want to know exactly how that's going to be, so that and partly that's because I want to do it well and do it right, but in that, then me having all the control doesn't leave room for anything else.
I know.
And that, as I've got older, I've learned that more.
Yes.
But
and I'm a wee bit older too, Lynn, so
pass your knowledge.
Definitely when you look back you can see it, but at the time you do struggle, don't you? And, you know, I suppose life isn't easy either, and we do have to face challenges as well, so, you know, it is difficult at times.
Yeah, and we want answers and reasons for things sometimes too, that just sometimes aren't there.
That's it.
You know, and then learning to accept that that's okay. It's probably one of the hardest things, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so for us in church, we're exploring this. We have a word for the year every year where we look at a different theme. And so for this year, we're in a season of patience.
Yes.
And we're really sort of only just starting now to explore what that really means. I think most of us have lived through that in some way, but as a church group, we're looking at that. And then we're going to be looking at how that leads us into a season of strength. And I suppose I was wondering, is there experiences that you've had where you've seen that happen, you know, one or both, or a connection between the two at all?
I think the last year has probably taught me more about patience than anything else. Right. You know, when lockdown happened last March, suddenly everything changed. You know, I'm used with clients coming into my room. I work in Carrick most of the time, but in Donaghadee 2 days a week. And then I would always have had clients across the UK, telephone clients and Zoom clients, or Skype it was then, but it's only a couple, you know. So I was used with people being in my room all the time. And then suddenly everything changed very quickly. Yeah. You know, it was phone calls, emails, we need to change this immediately. And we all thought it was only for a few weeks. And there was a bit of a buzz with that. Yeah. And then suddenly it went on, and it was, you know, when are we going to come out of this? And I think it just wasn't for work, it was for everything, because I love to go out. I love to go out for meals and coffees and go to theatre and the cinema and meet up with people. And all that was taken away. And I think for me that was a huge lesson in patience, because none of us had any control, and it wasn't just me or you, it was everybody right across the board. And that certainly taught me a lot about control and patience. And I always loved to have things in my diary to look forward to. Suddenly my holidays were cancelled, and last April they were cancelled, rebooked for this April. In fact, I should have been coming home from Mallorca on Sunday there. Wow. But that was all cancelled again. So I suppose it's taught me that I have no control at times, and that I have to go with the flow and be patient. And I think now, when I look at my diary and there's nothing there at the weekend, that's okay. But it's been hard to adjust to that.
Yeah.
And we don't know where this is going to go. You know, we can't say by June we'll be back working, you know, face to face, or we'll be able to meet up with people, or September. So it's having the patience just to take it a week at a time. And I think that's been a huge lesson for me.
And I think every industry is approaching this sort of return to work in different ways because of maybe their clientele needs or safety, and I think those things are. So even though maybe some places are back, we were talking about hairdressers there before. You know, we're so excited for them to be back. We're so excited for them to be back. But you know, but then there's other services, you know, that to do with mental health and emotional well-being that aren't. They never really maybe fully went away, but they weren't there to be in the same force and offer the same strength as before. And would you have noticed, or is it too soon to say, about any patterns or anything new that you're seeing through counselling or through working with people over this year?
I think one of the biggest things is people who've lost loved ones to COVID. That's massive. You know, people whose relatives have either died of COVID or have died during the restriction times, not having the funerals that they needed, not having the goodbyes, not being able to go into the hospital, and maybe not even able to attend the funeral because they are shielding or they have COVID themselves. I think there's going to be huge repercussions from that because people haven't been able to go through the rituals. I mean, we're very much in our country into, aren't we, you know, socialising when somebody dies. We have a wake, we have get-togethers after, we have cups of tea and people sit around and chat, you share stories. You hear things about older people that you wouldn't have known, and culturally those rituals are very important to us. And also, I suppose, having services, you know, where people can all get together and then have tea afterwards, and then suddenly it's cut down to maybe, you know, at one stage, what was it, 12 or 10 people? And I was at one and there was 25 there, and everybody was spaced out around the church, and then when you came out you couldn't really talk to people much. So, and for some families who have big families, that's been really difficult because they've had to choose a certain number of people. Some people are finding it really hard to grieve because they haven't been at the funeral. In fact, I was just talking to somebody today who had a similar experience like that. So, you know, it's really hard then to grieve, and some people even think, is the person dead, because they didn't see them in the hospital. They weren't able to see them in the undertakers because it was a COVID death or whatever. So there's an awful lot of issues for people to work through. And it's good that they come for counselling to see through those issues. Also, another thing is loneliness and anxiety, and people think it's only the over 80s that are lonely, but it's not. It's young people, it's people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, right across the board. And I've been working with some young people who have been very anxious about even going back into school. How will they walk through the door? How will they mix with peers again? Because it's all been on FaceTime or Zoom classes. People working at home in their 20s and 30s who are on their own. And those things are very difficult, and yet I don't think the press pick up on that. So I think the pandemic has caused lots of issues right across age ranges, and children too.
I think that the effects they're going to remain to be seen, I suppose, as the generations sort of grow and mature, and to see what those after effects will be.
And it seems like the mental health pandemic will be even worse than the COVID pandemic, because we'll be working at that for years. I know even the people some people I've been speaking to who are maybe happy to be at home and are content at home, but then I suppose as I'm a social person, I like out and about, but I think about that, how we need to be with each other for challenge, and we need to be uncomfortable to grow, and that's so important as well. And when we sometimes we stay home to protect ourselves, but that we can't really protect ourselves, and we don't develop and grow as people if we do that. And that's, I think, just everybody's going to have those different facets to deal with. And it's almost like being reintroduced to socialisation as well. You know, people think they'll just run back into a coffee shop or a grip setting, and yet some people are really struggling with that. So it'll be interesting to see. And I think too it'll be interesting to see how many people come back to churches. Because they've got a new routine on a Sunday now, and that's been a year and a half really, hasn't it? Or nearly.
It's been a while.
And it's limited numbers and it's masks, and that's difficult. So You know, that's another issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what that looks like. And for us, we are not going to go back until our building is complete, because our room that we used for church was just so small. It housed us but to do distancing and have people just sit and no children and wandering around and things, we couldn't do that.
Couldn't do that, so now you have to go back.
And has Joymount had any return to services in the interim periods?
Yeah, well, they're back, but just limited numbers.
Yeah. It will be interesting then to see how that goes.
Yeah.
And is there anything else that you'd like to share or chat about?
Seeing what you've asked me.
Now that you've got your notes.
What you've
Don't
asked
miss the important stuff.
You said you'd asked me about advice to your younger self.
That's right, I did.
Which I thought was interesting. And I was thinking about that over the last week since you sent me it. And I suppose as I thought about it, the first thing I thought was don't worry. Because I've spent so many sleepless nights worrying about things and worrying about people. And, you know, it's easy to say don't worry, but I think if you can trust that it's not your responsibility, that it's God's responsibility. So not to worry is the first thing. And another thing that I've learned, as I've said before, from the pandemic is not to plan too far ahead, because then there's less disappointment.
Yeah.
And obviously, I suppose if you're going to book a holiday or a concert or something, you do need to plan ahead. But, you know, I think this pandemic has taught us all that, you know, the planning doesn't always work out. And another thing then, the third one was trust more. That it's not my issue or my responsibility, but my counselling supervisor always has said, trust the process, Lynda.
Oh, yes.
And she would just love that I was quoting that. But, you know, I think there is something about trusting the process, isn't there? And working through it, and sometimes just remembering that we're human beings, not human doings.
Yes.
And we don't have to be doing all the time. And certainly the pandemic has allowed us to stop and allowed us to maybe read a bit more or walk a bit more or do nice things. So definitely not worrying. And also look after yourself better, more self-care. I think when you look back and see all the running about and building so much into a day or a week. Yeah. So, but I can't go back. I have to move forward.
Well, that's it.
Wish I could go back sometimes, but I can't do that.
It. And then the learning that you wouldn't be yourself if you did all those things years ago. You wouldn't have learned the lessons in the same way.
That's right. I know.
But I think those are really valuable pieces of advice, definitely. And it's funny that you say trust the process, because I don't know how many years ago it was whenever Ian was building the website with you, and you said that to him, and that's from then. Yes, and from then that's a phrase that's in our house all the time.
Is that right?
Whatever the process is, just about let the thing become what it's going to become.
Yeah.
You have influence and you have direction in it, but you don't need to be in complete control of it. And if you hold it too tightly, then it can't become and grow and have the life that it needs to have, whatever the issue or thoughts or relationships or whatever they are. So yes, you can tell your supervisor that.
It's growing.
That has grown. There's a whole field of it in our house. It's really good.
It's very good, isn't it? Yeah.
And it takes the onus of you needing to be that person.
Yeah. It's all about, I think life's all about lessons, isn't it? And we have to learn from the lessons. If only we could learn a bit earlier. So for all the people listening who are younger than me, take note.
And keep learning, that's really important.
But that's it, isn't it? You know? And my motto is every day's a school day.
Yeah.
Because I love new things, I love learning new things, and I love people. People really fascinate me. So, I love meeting new people and people I've known for years, but I just love learning something new every day, and we do, don't we? Yeah. I always mean to write it down, but I've never got round to that.
You'd miss the other things then if you wrote it all down.
Wouldn't you? That's it. Spontaneity is the word of the day.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much for coming and having a chat with me. Really appreciate it. And
thank you.
If anybody were interested or needing to get in contact with you, would there be a way that they could, if they need to inquire about counselling? And what's the best way?
Well, they could find me on Facebook, Lynda Graham Counselling.
Okay, yep.
Probably is the easiest way.
Okay.
Because all my details are on there, so.
Yep. And if anybody did or weren't able to find that, then you can private message us at the church.
Yeah, that's fine.
I can pass information
contact
on.
Lynn, and you can get in touch.
That'd be great.
Yeah, that's great. And if anybody even just wants to you know, check out if that's for them. That's okay too. I mean, I wouldn't tie anybody in initially if they just want to have a chat. If counselling's right for them, there's no problem there. Just get in touch.
Yeah, brilliant. Yes, do. And I couldn't recommend that enough. You know, we don't normally speak to cameras much, but it's.
Sorry,
I think no, definitely. But I think it's really important that you know, do even take that first step out, because it's such a it's a start of an exploration or a journey for yourself into to sort of the freedom that awaits for you. So yeah, I definitely can recommend. I've spent time in Lynda's office and I would never regret a minute of it. Yeah, definitely do get in touch with us, or if you can find Lynda on Facebook.
I think it's really important too to say there's no stigma. I mean, I would go for counselling too.
Yeah.
And as therapists in training, we go for personal therapy, and I don't have any problem going back in to therapy. I think for me it's a very healthy thing to do. So, you know, and it doesn't have to be for years. It can be for just a few sessions.
Yeah.
So, you know, please don't think there's any stigma around that. So.
Yeah, definitely, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate you sharing everything, and hopefully this will do the rounds over the weekend. Everybody will get to hear your advice and tips and life experience. Thanks. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and do feel free to check out our other conversations that we've recorded previously, and I'm not sure who we're going to have next month, but you can tune in and find out. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.